Humans are faced with many challenges, one of which is climate change. An experiment was conducted on the environment and climate in the 1930s when people first noticed climate change. Humans have been trying to change their lifestyles to deal with it, but the observation of climate change is difficult from area to area. A method is introduced to help understand the mechanism of the climate system. Researchers predict that temperatures will increase about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels, which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas, and species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction, although much remains to be learned about global warming. Many organizations advocate cutting greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the impact of global warming. Consumers can help by saving energy around the house, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs, and driving fewer miles in the car each week. These simple changes may help keep the earth cooler in the future. There's sugar in a lot of foods where you don't expect it. Of course, there's lots of sugar in donuts or ice cream, or pastries, or other things that are sweet, candy of course, but there are other places where you see it and you don't necessarily expect it. As an example, peanut butter. Here's a list of ingredients from Skippy peanut butter and you see that sugar is the second most common ingredient. You may know from reading food labels that these ingredients in any food label are listed in order of how much there is in the food itself, so sugar comes right after peanuts. Here's another example, beef stew. You wouldn't necessarily expect to find sugar in beef stew, but it's there. Now it's down the list of ingredients, it's actually toward the end, but if you look at the marketing of this and look at the can, it says, there's fresh potatoes and carrots, but actually there's more sugar in this than there is carrot. There's sugar in a lot of foods where you don't expect it. Of course, there's lots of sugar in donuts or ice cream, or pastries, or other things that are sweet, candy of course, but there are other places where you see it and you don't necessarily expect it. As an example,
there are two main reasons why parents decide to educate their children at home. Either they dislike schools on principle, however odd those principles might be, or they don't believe their local schools provide an adequate education or the right sort of education for their children. If someone decides to teach their child at home, either by themselves or by employing a teacher, they have to convince their local education authority, LEA, that the teaching provided is satisfactory. Schedules, lesson plans, and book lists must be shown, and it must also be demonstrated that the child is in fact learning, and that they have adequate opportunities for physical education and meeting other children. Furthermore, while there is no formal assessment, officers from the LEA will come and inspect what is being done and look at the child's exercise books. If they are not satisfied, they make out a school attendance order.
Today we're going to talk some more about architecture and what makes for a good design. There are, of course, a whole range of qualities that most architects would like their buildings to possess. One of these is the durability of the building. Architects must consider how well the building will stand up to the ravages of climate and time. Will it remain robust and in good condition? Clearly, requirements will vary according to the surroundings of the building in question. A design that is suitable for Dubai will have different needs from one for Moscow. Then, of course, it's essential to consider the appearance of the building. Regardless of what its purpose may be, will people find pleasure in looking at it? An original and still respected writer on architecture, the Roman Vitruvius, wrote in the 1st century that a building should delight people and should raise their spirits. Again, tastes may vary from one society to the next, but the principle remains the same. Owls can be found in dense forests right across North America. They feed on small mammals, fish, birds, and small reptiles, pretty much anything that comes their way. The barred owl grows up to half a meter tall and has emerged as a very adaptable nocturnal predator. Whereas they've been long thought to live in old-growth forests, they're now building up quite an urban population. In Charlotte, North Carolina, barred owls tend to nest in the cavities of the numerous willow oak trees that line the city streets. Far from being endangered, the owls have expanded their range, and now, in some places, conservationists are worried about the effects they might have on other native species.
The question about education is then, why do some types of student achieve success easily and others struggle to do well? Well, one theory is that there's a genetic reason for academic achievement. What I mean by that is a certain innate, measurable level of intelligence. Another frequently discussed theory is environmental factors, such as the effect of home and family upbringing. A final reason is related to the teaching and learning process within educational institutions, and the way it is organized, administered, and assessed.
I'd like you to think for a moment about your hands and all the things you can do with them. You can use them to write or to drive. You can thread a needle, play the drums, build a wall, and so on and so forth. They can be careful and precise. Think of someone doing eye surgery, for example. But they can also generate huge forces. And here you might think of the sports person throwing a discus or lifting a heavy weight. How is it possible for our hands to be so incredibly flexible? Well, it's all down to the extraordinary complexity of the bones, ligaments, nerves, and muscles that lie beneath the skin of our hands. There are, for example, 9 muscles alone controlling just one thumb. Some of these are anchored to bones within the hand, while others link to the arm.
The division of literary works into genres, or texts that deal with a particular subject or a subject in a particular way, makes life easier for the person browsing in a bookshop. He or she can go directly to where their favourite kind of book is shelved, be it science fiction, gothic, romance, and so on. Many writers of genre fiction are immensely popular and successful. Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, to name only 2. But, for the most part, such writers aren't depicting the world we live in and are writing fantasies. However, some genre writers, particularly writers of detective and police fiction, are unhappy about being categorized in this way. Genre fiction, they say, has come to be seen as inferior to what is called mainstream or literary fiction. In other words, detective fiction isn't taken seriously as literature, and yet crime novels do deal with the raw stuff of everyday life. They are, in fact, closer to the harsh reality of the modern world than most mainstream fiction. But, the critics say, while they do deal with the usual stuff of novels, character, emotion, psychology, social comment, and so on, it seldom goes very deep. And, besides, most detective fiction, like certain mass-produced romantic novels, though not to anywhere near the same extent, follow a formula.
Surfing has been a central part of Hawaiian culture for hundreds of years, but surfing wasn't just a pastime for the Hawaiians in ancient times. It served as a kind of training exercise, meant to keep chiefs in top physical condition. Chiefs demonstrated their mastery by their skill in the surf, and commoners gained popularity by the way they handled themselves in the ocean. As well as this, surfing served as a system for conflict resolution. Young males would test their surfing skills in fierce competitions, during which wealth, pride, and even romance
Height is correlated with a lot of things. Up to a certain height, taller people make more money than the vertically challenged, and the taller presidential candidate almost always wins. Now a study finds that your height as an adult has a profound effect on your perception of your health. Short people judge their health to be worse than average or tall people judge theirs. The research was published in the journal Clinical Endocrinology. Data for the study came from the 2003 Health Survey for England. More than 14,000 participants filled out questionnaires and had their heights measured. The study only looked at how good the subject thought his or her health was, not their actual health. Questions focused on 5 areas: mobility, self-care, normal activities, pain or discomfort, and anxiety or depression. Men shorter than about 5'4" and women shorter than 5 feet reported the worst impressions, but small increases in height at the low end had much bigger effects on perception than the same increases among taller people. Other studies have shown, ironically, that shorter people on average actually live longer.
Scientists discover new species all the time, on the order of 15,000 a year. One of the latest additions to the Tree of Life is a new type of leopard frog, which might sound unremarkable, except for where it was found: New York City. But how's a frog go unnoticed in the Big Apple? Well, even experts have a hard time telling this new species from its northern and southern cousins, on looks alone. But the new guy has a different croak, which raised ecologists' suspicions. So they tracked down 4 leopard frog populations with the unique call, including one within view of the Statue of Liberty, and took DNA samples. As they suspected, the odd croakers weren't southern or northern leopard frogs, or even a mix. They had a genetic ancestry of their own, earning them new species status. Those results appear in the journal Molecular Phylogenetics and Evolution. The frogs are tough New Yorkers. The center of their range appears to be Yankee Stadium, but the researchers say the urban amphibians face threats like pesticides and infectious diseases, not to mention real-life games of Frogger.
More graduate training is needed after university study has finished. Your ideas are discussed and debated in seminars and tutorials. Academic libraries across the world are steadily incorporating social media. Imported default packages are likely to be used for most computers.
So between 4,000 and 3,003. So between 4,000 and 3,000.
Question about education is then, why do some types of student achieve success easily? question about education.